Okay, so The Last of Us is a pretty damn good game. It takes around 15 to 20 hours to complete the game or first time through. And while to me the game has its ups and downs, it definitely delivers a satisfying experience in an overall sense. Of course, it's developed by Naughty Dogs, the creator of the highly acclaimed Uncharted series, and so much was anticipated from this title. For the most part, it delivers. And this video is looking into the top 5 reasons why The Last of Us is awesome. A word of warning though, this video will contain some spoilers for the game, so proceed with caution. Number 5. Satisfying melee. Right off the bat, you'll realize a few things with The Last of Us's melee attacks. There's a variety of them and they pack a mean punch. Whether you equip yourself with a proper melee weapon, equip a brick or bottle, or simply rely on your fists, there's a sense of satisfaction from executing all these melee attacks. This is an important point, as melee becomes a strategic tool in order to conserve your ammo in the game, especially during the early stages. The other great aspect to the melee attacks is that punches have Joel reacting to his surroundings, so you'll end up crushing an enemy's head against a nearby wall or onto a concrete slab. All this adds more weight to the melee combat. Number 4. Satisfying weapons. The further you get into the game, the more weapons you will obtain. The majority of these weapons are, like the melee system, pretty satisfying to use. We're talking about both the weapons and the bombs that you can create in the game. It's very satisfying to strategically use your bombs to take out a bunch of enemies or to provide cover with a smoke bomb. The weapons themselves are great to use too. The shotgun, bow and flamethrower are personal favorites of mine. The best part of the game in terms of these weapons though is the fact that you really have to rely on what you have, because you can't rely on just one weapon or just one strategy all the time. The game is cheap with ammo, and so you have to adapt to the situation and utilize whatever you have at your disposal. That to me is kind of awesome. Number 3. Dialogue between Joel and Ellie. Joel and Ellie are the main characters in The Last of Us. They are the only two characters that really accompany you throughout the whole game, with everyone else who you meet coming and going for various reasons. Thus their interactions were vitally important in order for the gamer to remain invested in the story basically. And they really delivered. Whether it be during the cutscenes or during the in-game moments where you can talk to others, the dialogue between the two shines. You easily develop some sort of understanding towards both characters, and as time moves on, how they come to rely on each other. It is a kind of poignant tale of two people brought together in such a disparaging situation. From the light-hearted moments to the darker tones, each moment in the game is delivered brilliantly. Number 2. The ending. What can I say? The ending to The Last of Us was pretty heavy. Even though it's not as big a surprise nor as mentally stimulating as say BioShock Infinite's ending, I prefer it substantially. The whole sequence of realizing how much your efforts weren't really rewarded was pretty big. Even bigger though was the change in Joel come the end. Just before he and Ellie entered the hospital, he made mention how they could just turn back, walk away, and live as well as possible. Ellie, however, wanted to complete the journey, and right at the end, Joel has to straight up lie to get his way. Sacrificing Ellie was just too big a hurdle, and I personally actually feel kind of the same way. In my eyes, Ellie does know that Joel is lying, but the mystery is there, and one wonders what the future could hold for them. So granted, it does open up the game to a sequel, but at least the main plot of the game was concluded. Even if no sequel ever materializes, you'll always be left with this negative feeling of lies and distrust that is there now between the two main characters, and to me, I actually kind of like that. And number 1, the best part to me about The Last of Us goes down to Ellie's gameplay section. And that's basically, I'm just talking about all the gameplay sections, which is mostly in the fall chapters, I believe, where you control Ellie. So this comes during a time when you are already have Joel upgraded to a decent amount in both level terms, in terms of weapons as well. And so you were accustomed to the abilities of his character, To then switch the game to Ellie's perspective was kind of massive, as Ellie is much more weaker than Joel and has less weapons to work with. The sections were probably the hardest in the game, especially as meleeing wasn't a real option for her either. She was just way more weaker than Joel. You felt way more vulnerable controlling Ellie than you ever did with Joel. Her gameplay sections were thus more tense, and the small boss battle that you had for her in her section was actually pretty nicely done in my eyes. All in all, the difficulty of her section just made it all that more memorable to me. I had to replay those sections quite a few times on hard. I haven't really played on the other difficulty, survival was it? But even on hard I had to replay it a few times just because of you have to get used to it. And you know, as frustrated as I was with that, I actually grew to like it. And to me that's kind of excellent. So that's all folks, those are my top 5 reasons why I think The Last of Us is awesome. There are various other reasons why the game is awesome too. I think there are a few things that you could list that's not necessarily even gameplay related if you just want to focus on the story. But I do think that things like the satisfying melee and weapon, they are important because those things carry the game throughout the whole game. So those things being decent and those things being good, you get to experience that throughout each chapter of the game, whereas if you focus on a simple story element, those are always chapter specific. Nevertheless, sometimes they can have a real big impact, the stories segments. So I do feel though that the game has its ups and downs. So it wasn't the greatest game in my eyes, as opposed to how some other reviewers out there have claimed it to be. Nevertheless, it was a great ride and I would totally be excited to play a sequel. So I leave this video asking you guys what was most memorable to you, and do the positives of the game outweigh the negatives, and are you looking forward to a sequel? So that's all from me. Thanks for watching and see you next time.